The Universal Concordat had solved the problem of trust approximately 400 years ago by eliminating it entirely. Why bother with something as messy and unpredictable as mutual faith when you could simply record everything, everywhere, all the time? 23,000 species had signed on to this arrangement, each one agreeing that yes, constant surveillance was a small price to pay for the illusion of security. The official motto was, "Transparency breeds harmony." The unofficial motto, whispered in maintenance shafts and cargo bays, was, "Big Brother got an upgrade, and now he has compound eyes." Station Meridian Eclipse embodied this philosophy so thoroughly that it was less a space station and more a floating panopticon wrapped in expensive architecture. Built at the intersection of 7 major trade routes, it served as a hub for commerce, diplomacy, cultural exchange, and the kind of performative peacekeeping that required excellent lighting and multiple camera angles. The station could house 75,000 beings across its 300 levels, and every single cubic meter of habitable space was monitored by no fewer than 4 recording devices. Except, of course, when it wasn't. See, the thing about surveillance states is that they're only as reliable as the people running them. And the people running them, the ones with access codes and override privileges and the kind of inherited authority that came from being born to the right parents. Well, they had a vested interest in making sure certain things went unrecorded. The cameras saw everything, sure. But the archives were curated. Station Meridian Eclipse had a population that broke down roughly into 3 categories. At the top were the privileged, diplomats' children, heirs to corporate dynasties, anyone whose family name appeared in the Concordat's social registries. In the middle were the functional, administrators, merchants, skilled professionals who kept the station's economy humming. And at the bottom, so far down they practically lived in the substructure, were the essential. The maintenance crews, sanitation workers, cargo handlers, and anyone else who did the jobs that nobody wanted to think about. Deathworlders occupied a special subcategory of essential. They were too useful to exclude entirely. Someone had to fix the radiation leaks and handle the toxic waste and do the repairs in areas where the gravity generators had failed, but too disturbing to properly integrate. The Concordat had very mixed feelings about species that had evolved on planets actively trying to murder them. On one hand, they made excellent employees for terrible jobs. On the other hand, they had this unsettling tendency to survive things that would kill normal, civilized beings. Humans were particularly problematic in this regard. Earth had been classified as a Class 11 death world, which placed it in the aggressively hostile category right between the atmosphere, is literally poison, and the local fauna have weaponized themselves. The Concordat had approved human membership 73 years ago, mainly because a transport ship had suffered a catastrophic failure in the outer reaches, and the only species willing to do a spacewalk through a debris field to repair it had been a human freight worker who'd responded to the distress call with, "Yeah, sure, I've got a suit and some zip ties." The human in question, whose name the station records consistently rendered as a string of question marks, followed by primate designation 428, had been on Meridian Eclipse for 11 months. She worked in hazardous systems maintenance, which was a polite way of saying she fixed things that were actively trying to kill anyone who got near them. She was good at her job, possibly too good, because she kept surviving situations that were supposed to be handled by remote drones. And this made the budget managers nervous. She had a name, of course, a real one, given by real parents on a real planet. But the station's linguistic processors had decided that human names were too complicated and had filed her under a classification code instead. She'd stopped correcting people after the first month. What was the point? To the Concordat, she wasn't a person. She was a function, a useful function, like a wrench that could also walk. The Meridian Atrium occupied the central hub of Deck 47 and represented everything the Concordat wanted to believe about itself. Soaring ceilings of photoreactive crystal, gardens featuring flora from 80 different worlds, all carefully maintained in their own climate-controlled biomes. Sculptures that shifted and changed based on the viewer's species-specific wavelength perception. It was beautiful, expensive, and absolutely teeming with cameras. 64 cameras, to be precise. The atrium was one of the most heavily monitored spaces on the station because it served as a meeting point for high-level negotiations. Every conversation, every handshake, every carefully orchestrated diplomatic incident got recorded from multiple angles in 8 different spectrums. The security feeds were supposedly archived for 75 years and accessible only by court order. Supposedly. The human had come to the atrium because the central atmospheric processor, the one that regulated air mixture for the entire deck, was making a noise that the automated diagnostics insisted was normal, but that her experienced ears recognized as about to catastrophically fail in the next 48 hours. She'd filed a priority maintenance request. It had been denied because the atrium was hosting a reception for the Voltharian Trade Consortium's junior members that evening, and maintenance work was considered unseemly during social events. So she'd come anyway. During the 2-hour gap between the afternoon session and the evening reception, carrying her diagnostic equipment in a battered case that had survived 3 station assignments and a brief period as a makeshift blast shield. The processor was hidden behind a decorative grille in the east wall, tucked behind a display of crystalline singing ferns that produced different musical notes based on air pressure. She was elbow-deep in its access panel, tracing a failing regulator circuit, when she heard the voices. Absolutely primitive. I mean, look at this garden arrangement. They've actually mixed species from different atmospheric zones. The ferns are going to choke out the Thessian dream vines within a week. The voice belonged to a Kethrin, which meant its owner had too many legs, iridescent chitin, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to work for anything. Kethrins were one of the Concordat's founding species, which meant they'd been wealthy and influential for so long that they'd forgotten what either term actually meant. Does it matter? This whole station is basically a theme park for species that couldn't make it on their own worlds. This voice was higher, musical, belonging to an etherborn, a species that looked like someone had taken the concept of a person, made it out of semi-solid light, and then given it opinions about art. I'm only here because Father insisted I complete a civic rotation before he'd approve my gallery opening on Praxis Prime. There were 5 of them, the human noted without turning around. She'd learned to track threats by sound, a skill that came from working in environments where looking away from your task could mean losing a hand to unshielded machinery. 5 distinct voices, 5 different species, all of them moving through the atrium with the kind of casual ownership that marked them as privileged. She kept working. If she finished the diagnostic quickly enough, she could file an emergency override on the maintenance request and be gone before they noticed her. Oh gods, what is that smell? One of them had wandered closer. This voice belonged to a Phylexian, a species that resembled a mobile plant, but with more attitude and fewer redeeming qualities. It's like industrial solvent, and is that mammalian sweat? The human's hands paused for just a second. Then she continued working, faster now. There's something behind the ferns. The Kethrin again, closer now. Is that? It is. There's a maintenance worker here during the reception setup. Someone should really inform the event coordinator, the Etherborn chimed. The atrium is supposed to be restricted during social preparation periods. The human pulled her arm out of the access panel and turned around, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. The 5 of them had formed a loose semicircle about 3 meters away, all looking at her with varying expressions of distaste. "Emergency maintenance," she said calmly, gesturing to the processor. "There's a failing regulator that could dump carbon dioxide into the deck's air supply. I filed a request." "A request that was denied," the Kethrin said. Its name was something unpronounceable, but the silver insignia on its thorax marked it as a consortium member. "Which means you're here in violation of station protocols." "The regulator is going to fail," the human repeated, keeping her voice level. "When it does, everyone on this deck is going to start suffocating. I'm trying to prevent that." How dramatic. The Phylexian drifted closer, its bioluminescent leaves pulsing with amusement. "The Deathworlder thinks it understands our systems better than the automated diagnostics. Tell me, how many years of engineering training do you have? Or did you learn everything you know from hitting things with primitive tools?" The human felt something tighten in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "I have 6 years of experience in hazardous systems maintenance across 4 different stations. The diagnostic algorithms are optimized for normal wear patterns. They don't account for the kind of stress that comes from running the processors at 110% capacity during reception events." "Oh, it's lecturing us now?" The Etherborn laughed, and it sounded like wind chimes having a nervous breakdown. "Did everyone hear? The maintenance drone has opinions about capacity management." "I'm just trying to do my job," the human said. She turned back to the access panel. "If you'll excuse me." "I don't think we will excuse you." The Kethrin moved to block her path. "I think you're going to pack up your primitive tools and remove yourself from this space before you contaminate it further with your presence." The human looked up at the ceiling. The cameras were there, 64 of them, each one mounted in crystal housing that made them look like artfully placed jewels rather than surveillance equipment. Little indicator lights glowed steadily, showing active recording status. She looked back at the Kethrin. "I need to finish this repair." "No." The Kethrin leaned forward, using its height advantage. At full extension, it stood nearly 3 meters tall. "You need to learn your place. Maintenance work is done during maintenance hours in maintenance areas by beings who understand that their function is to serve, silently and invisibly. The regulator is fine. The diagnostics say it's fine. Are you suggesting that our technology is inferior to your Deathworld intuition?" The Kethrin's mandibles clicked in a pattern that translated to contempt. "You know what your problem is? Your species hasn't learned the fundamental lesson of civilization. Some beings matter, and some beings don't. Guess which category you fall into." The other 4 had spread out slightly, forming a loose perimeter, not quite surrounding her, but close enough. It was a practiced formation, the human realized. They'd done this before. "I'm going to file a report," she said quietly. "Oh, please do." The Phylexian laughed. "File it right next to all the other complaints from lower-tier workers who thought they deserved fair treatment. I'm sure someone will get right on that." The human bent down to pick up her equipment case. As she did, the Kethrin's leg swept out and kicked it, sending tools scattering across the atrium floor. "Oops," the Kethrin said. "How clumsy of me." The human stood very still. She could feel her heartbeat accelerating, feel the ancient chemistry starting to flood her system. Adrenaline cortisol, the fight-or-flight cocktail that had kept her ancestors alive on the African savanna when something with claws decided they looked tasty. "Pick them up," she said, her voice very calm. "Excuse me?" The Catherine leaned closer. "Did the maintenance drone just give me an order? Pick up my tools. Or what? What are you going to do exactly?" The Catherine's laugh was a clicking, chittering sound. "File another report? Complain to your supervisor? Oh, wait. Your supervisor is my father's third assistant's intern. I wonder how seriously he'll take your concerns." The human knelt down and started gathering her tools. The Catherine waited until she'd collected 3 of them, then swept its leg again, scattering them once more. "I don't think you're understanding the lesson here," it said. "The lesson is that you don't matter. Your tools don't matter. Your safety protocols don't matter. You are a function, and right now, your function is making this space smell like Deathworld sweat and industrial failure." The human looked up, looked past the Catherine to the cameras, all 64 of them, still recording, still watching. She stood up, leaving the tools on the floor. "I'm going to walk away now," she said. "Are you?" The Etherborn had moved to block the nearest exit. "I'm not sure we're done with you yet. See, my friend here just realized something. You've contaminated this entire area with your presence. The ferns will need to be replaced. The air will need to be cycled. We're going to miss the evening reception because of your thoughtless violation of protocol. That's not, and I think you need to apologize." The Catherine moved closer, using its size now. "Get on your knees and apologize for disrupting our space." "No. No?" The Catherine's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. It just said no. Did everyone hear that? The Deathworld function just refused a direct instruction from a consortium member. The human's hands had curled into fists at her sides. She could feel her breathing changing, becoming deeper, more efficient. Her vision had sharpened, detail coming into hyperfocus. Her body was preparing for violence, whether her mind had agreed to it or not. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Let me leave." "Or what?" And that's when the lights went out. Not all of them, just the indicator lights on the cameras. 64 little status LEDs, all showing active recording, all going dark in a cascading wave that swept through the atrium in 3 seconds. The human saw it happen. So did the Catherine, though it didn't understand the significance. Not yet. "Even the station systems are tired of watching you." The Phylexian laughed. "I think that's a sign." The Catherine grabbed the front of the human's maintenance jumpsuit with one of its manipulator appendages. I said, "Get on your knees and apologize." The human looked at the darkened cameras, then at the 5 beings surrounding her, then at the Catherine's 3-meter frame towering over her. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a species that had spent 200,000 years learning how to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves. "You should have let me fix the regulator," she said. Then she moved. Humans are not impressive by Concordat standards. They're not strong like Borlaxians, not fast like Zephite-kin, not armored like Kragthoids. They're just adequate. Adequate strength, adequate speed, adequate durability. Thoroughly mediocre in every measurable category. But adequate is relative. And what's adequate for surviving on a death world is spectacular overkill for dealing with species that evolved in gentler environments. The human grabbed the Catherine's manipulator appendage, the one holding her jumpsuit, with both hands. She twisted, using the grip as an anchor point, and drove her shoulder into what passed for its knee joint. The joint bent backward with a sound like snapping plastic. The Kethrin screamed, a high-pitched whistle that probably would have summoned security if the communication system hadn't mysteriously failed at exactly that moment. She didn't let go. Instead, she used the Kethron's own grip to pull herself up, getting both feet off the ground, and drove her knee into its sensory cluster. 3 of its 6 eyes shattered. It released her. She dropped, landed in a crouch, and immediately rolled sideways as the Phylexian lunged at her with its root tentacles extended. The tentacles hit the floor where she'd been with enough force to crack the decorative tiles. The Etherborn was backing away now, its semi-solid form flickering with what might have been fear. "Security! Someone call—" But the communication panels were offline. The emergency call buttons showed error messages. Even the personal comm devices that everyone in the atrium carried were displaying the same message. Network unavailable. One of the others, a Silthrene who looked like a mobile column of segmented crystal, rushed her from the side. She sidestepped, grabbed one of its segments as it passed, and used its own momentum to send it crashing into one of the fern displays. Crystal and plant matter exploded across the floor. The 5th one, a Grethix with too many arms and not enough sense, was trying to circle behind her. She picked up her equipment case, 15 kilograms of tools and reinforced composite, and threw it. It hit the Grethix in what passed for its face. The being went down hard. The Phylexian was trying again, its bioluminescent leaves flashing in what was probably meant to be a blinding pattern. Might have worked on prey species. Humans had evolved to hunt during the day and night, in forests and plains, in conditions ranging from perfect visibility to can't see your hand in front of your face. Their pattern recognition was excellent, and their brains were very good at filtering out irrelevant visual noise. She walked straight through the flashing lights and grabbed the Phylexian's central stem. It tried to wrap its tentacle roots around her, but she'd grown up on a planet where the plant life included things like poison ivy, stinging nettles, and the Australian jimpy tree. She knew how to handle aggressive flora. She twisted the stem. The Phylexian made a sound like tearing leaves and went limp. The entire fight had lasted maybe 40 seconds. The human stood in the center of the atrium, breathing hard. Around her, 5 members of the privileged class were scattered like broken toys. The Kethrin was still conscious, barely, making whimpering clicking sounds. The others were either unconscious or wishing they were. She looked up at the cameras. All 64 of them, their indicator lights still dark. "I know you're watching," she said to whoever had shut them down. "I know this was a setup." No response, just the silent cameras, the sound of her own breathing. She retrieved her equipment case, gathered her scattered tools, and walked out of the atrium. Behind her, the crystalline singing ferns were producing discordant notes, their melody disrupted by the broken air pressure from the failing regulator that nobody had wanted her to fix. She made it to the maintenance level before her hands started shaking. Made it to her quarters, a 3-meter by 2-meter box that the station generously classified as single-occupancy housing, before the adrenaline crash hit her properly. She sat on her bunk and stared at the wall, waiting for security to arrive. Because they would arrive. That was part of the pattern, wasn't it? The cameras shut off for the provocation, then came back on to record the response. She'd be arrested, charged with assault, blacklisted from every station in the Concordat. The fact that they'd attacked her first wouldn't matter. The fact that she'd been defending herself wouldn't matter. Nothing mattered except who you were and who you knew. She was still sitting there, waiting, when her door chime sounded. She opened it, expecting security. Instead, she found a nulthrine standing there. A species that looked like someone had combined an octopus with the electrical storm and given it a lab coat. Its name tag identified it as Senior Systems Engineer Crixthal. "You're not having a system malfunction?" it said without preamble. "No. But I received an automated alert suggesting your quarters required immediate engineering attention." It paused. "That's interesting, because I wrote the alert protocols, and they definitely shouldn't generate false positives. May I come in?" She stepped aside. The door closed behind it. Crixthal pulled out a datapad and started tapping through screens with 3 of its appendages. "You know what else is interesting? The surveillance system in the Meridian Atrium experienced a comprehensive failure approximately 1 hour ago. All 64 cameras, plus the backup units, plus the communication system, plus every personal recording device in a 30-meter radius." It looked up at her with eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum. "That's a lot of simultaneous failures." "Someone shut them down," the human said flatly. "Someone with very high-level access and very specific knowledge of the station's system architecture." Crixthal turned the datapad around. "See this command string. This is a maintenance override code. Very few beings have access to it. And the timestamp shows it was initiated 47 seconds before the consortium members entered the atrium." The human felt something cold settle in her stomach. They knew what was going to happen. They always know. This is the 7th incident this year, following the exact same pattern. Target someone from the essential class, preferably a Deathworlder. Provoke them in a surveilled area. Use administrative access to shut down recording at the moment of provocation. Wait for the victim to defend themselves. Bring the cameras back online to record the response. Security arrives, finds the poor, innocent, privileged class being attacked by a violent lower-tier worker. And then? And then the victim gets blacklisted, sometimes prosecuted, always destroyed professionally. Crixthal's tendrils writhed in what might have been anger. The pattern is very consistent, very effective. Nobody questions it because the cameras show clear evidence of assault. The fact that the first half of the confrontation wasn't recorded gets lost in the proceedings. "So why are you telling me this?" "Because something different happened this time." Crixthal tapped its datapad again. "The cameras were supposed to come back online after you'd been sufficiently provoked. That's how the pattern works. Except they didn't come back on. Someone kept them offline for the entire incident." The human stared at the engineer. "You." I noticed the unusual command string, recognized the pattern, and decided to extend the maintenance override until all parties had left the area. Crixthal's eyes glimmered with something that might have been satisfaction. By the time the systems came back online, the atrium was empty except for some damaged property and various biological fluids that the cleaning drones had already started processing. But the consortium members can still file a complaint. They can try, but without footage, it becomes a dispute between their word and yours. And disputes require investigations, witness interviews, reviews of system logs that might reveal some very interesting patterns of selective surveillance. Crixthal moved toward the door. "The families won't want that kind of attention. They'll accept the medical expenses as the cost of doing business and move on. Why would you risk your position to help me?" The engineer paused at the door. "Because I've been on this station for 14 years. 14 years of watching this happen. Watching the system protect certain people while grinding others down. And I have a very specific set of skills that finally allowed me to do something about it." it turned back. Also, between you and me, I was getting tired of the Kethran's offspring complaining about the atmospheric mixture in their quarters. They wanted it adjusted to exactly 72 degrees with 60% humidity. Do you know how much computational power that wastes? Now they can complain from the medical bay instead. It left. The human sat in her quarters for another hour, waiting for security. They never came. She went back to work the next day. Fixed the regulator in the atrium, working around the damaged fern display and the cracked tiles. Nobody stopped her. Nobody questioned her presence. The evening reception had been canceled, and the word through the maintenance network was that 5 consortium members had been injured in some kind of accident involving defective flooring. The story spread through the essential levels like wildfire. The details varied. In some versions, she'd fought off a dozen attackers. In others, she'd thrown the Kethran through a window. But the core truth remained. Someone had pushed back. Someone had fought back. And the cameras, those ever-watching eyes of the Concordat, had decided to look away at exactly the right moment. Things changed after that. Subtle things, mostly. The privileged still walked the corridors like they owned them, but they chose their targets more carefully. The Deathworlders, humans, Cravathi, Borlaxians, anyone from a planet with a double-digit danger classification, moved differently. Less like they were trying to be invisible. More like they remembered what their species had been before the Concordat civilized them. The surveillance system continued to watch everything, of course. 64 cameras in the atrium, thousands more throughout the station, all recording every moment for the archives. Except, of course, when they didn't. The human worked on Meridian Eclipse for another 2 years. She fixed regulators and patched hull breaches and crawled through access shafts that would have killed most civilized species. She never had another incident in the atrium. Never had to throw another punch or fight another member of the privileged class. But everyone knew she had. Everyone knew that when someone had pushed her past her limits, when the system had tried to grind her down and erase her resistance, she'd shown them exactly what a death world produced. Not victims, not servants, survivors. And somewhere in the station's vast archives, in a maintenance log that most beings would never read, was a single line of code. A command string that had kept the cameras dark for exactly 47 seconds. Long enough for the pattern to break. Long enough for the machine to stutter. Long enough for someone to remember that before there were cameras and surveillance states and civilizations built on selective blindness, there were species that survived by being just dangerous enough, just violent enough, just unbreakable enough to make it through another day. Crixthal kept that command string, saved it in a personal archive, separate from the official station records, just in case it was ever needed again. Because the thing about surveillance states is that they only work when everyone agrees to play along. When everyone accepts that the cameras see everything, record everything, judge everything fairly. But fairness, as it turned out, was negotiable. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, the people running the cameras decided to negotiate. Station Meridian Eclipse continued to orbit at the intersection of 7 trade routes, a gleaming monument to the Concordat's vision of universal peace and cooperation. 23,000 species, all working together under the watchful eyes of millions of cameras. Cameras that saw everything. Everything except what they chose not to see. And in the essential levels, in the maintenance shafts and cargo bays and hazardous work zones, the beings who kept the station running would sometimes pause in their work and look up at those cameras. And they'd remember that the most sophisticated surveillance system in galactic history could still be defeated by the oldest trick in the book. Someone on the inside who decided that enough was enough. The Concordate's official motto remained, "Transparency breeds harmony." But in the maintenance levels, they had a different saying. One that got passed around in a dozen languages, whispered in break rooms, and scrawled on the walls of spaces the cameras didn't quite reach. Even Big Brother blinks sometimes. And when he did, you'd better make